At a desolate Arizona shooting range, a lone woman practiced impossible shots. The regulars called her a ghost. Then one day, a Navy SEAL commander arrived, determined to expose her as a fraud. He was not prepared for the truth. The Sonoran Desert baked under a merciless sun, the heat shimmering off the cracked earth in waves. Here, at the edge of civilization, was a shooting range that felt more like a final outpost. And every morning, before the heat became unbearable, she would arrive. Her name was Aria Vance, but to the few regulars who saw her, she was simply the ghost. She drove a beat-up Ford Ranger that coughed dust with every mile. She didn't look like a legend. Standing at a distance, you'd see a woman of about 30, slender, with a tight scorpion braid of chestnut hair peeking from under a faded Montana Fisheries baseball cap. She wore dusty Carhartt work pants and a form-fitting gray Henley, stained with faint traces of gun oil. She never spoke, never made eye contact. She just paid her lane fee in cash to the owner, Roy, and walked to the farthest station, Lane 7. Roy had seen them all in his 20 years. Weekend warriors with brand new gear, ex-cops trying to stay sharp, young bucks convinced they were the next big thing. But Aria was different. She carried her rifle not in a tactical case, but wrapped in thick, oiled canvas. When she unwrapped it, it was like watching a priest unveil a holy relic. It was a Winchester Model 70, a pre-war classic with a walnut stock scarred by time and a barrel reblued to a deep, matte finish. She and her father had built it. She called it Dad's Promise. Her ritual was always the same. She'd set her targets out at extreme distances, never less than 800 yards, often pushing 1,300. Then she'd lie prone on her worn shooting mat, becoming part of the landscape. Her movements were fluid, economical. Adjust the vintage scope. Scan the horizon, not with her eyes, but with her entire body, feeling the whisper of the wind as it snaked through the cacti. Her breathing would slow until it was almost imperceptible. Then, the sequence, fire. A sharp crack that sliced through the silence. Pause. The recoil was absorbed into her shoulder as if she were made of stone. Breathe. A slow, controlled exhale. Repeat. 5 shots. She'd walk the length of the range, and every time, Roy would watch through his binoculars. 5 holes clustered so tightly in the bullseye they could be covered by a silver dollar. It was unnatural. The first time, people called it a fluke. The 10th time, they started whispering. Now, they just stayed away, calling her the ghost of Lane 7. One Tuesday morning, just after 7 a.m., the routine was broken. A black, heavily modified Chevrolet Suburban rolled onto the gravel lot. Its windows were tinted to the legal limit, and it had no license plates. It moved with a silent, predatory grace that made the air feel thick. Roy leaned out of his shack, squinting. That wasn't local. The driver's door opened and a man emerged. He was built like a monolith, tall, broad-shouldered, with a posture so rigid it seemed carved from granite. His beard was short, flecked with gray, and his eyes, hidden behind dark aviators, scanned the area with an unnerving intensity. He wore civilian clothes, but the precise, economical way he moved screamed elite military. This was a man who didn't just command respect, he bled authority. This was Commander Marcus Thorne. And he was here for the ghost. Commander Thorne didn't approach immediately. He leaned against the grill of his Suburban, arms crossed, a silent predator observing its prey. He'd heard the whispers from a retired contact, a woman in the Arizona desert who shot like a machine, a ghost with a rifle. Thorne, a man who had trained the most lethal operators on the planet, didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in skill, and he was here to measure it. Through his sunglasses, he analyzed Aria. She was already prone, completely oblivious to his presence. He saw it instantly, the perfect, low-profile posture, the way her shoulder was melded to the rifle's stock. He watched her make a micro-adjustment to her scope, not based on a wind meter, but on the way a distant tumbleweed danced. It was an instinctive correction, something he'd spent years trying to drill into his top SEAL snipers. She wasn't just trained, she was attuned. She fired a 5-round group. The sequence was fast, fluid, surgical. The distant ping of steel striking steel echoed back 5 times, almost too quick to count. Thorne's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of something, intrigue, perhaps disbelief, crossed his mind. He walked forward, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. Aria sensed his approach before she saw him, her body tensing as she stood to reload. Her hand never left the rifle. He stopped a respectful 10 feet away. "Mind if I watch?" His voice was calm, but it carried an undeniable weight of command. Aria studied him for a long moment. Her gaze was intense, analytical. Most men fidgeted under that stare. Thorne met it without flinching. "Free country," she replied, her voice low and raspy from disuse. He stepped closer, his eyes falling on her rifle. Winchester Model 70, he noted, his voice softening with a hint of professional appreciation. "Old, but immaculate. You won't find craftsmanship like that anymore." He saw the hand-tuned trigger assembly, the worn mill dots on the scope. "You military?" She shook her head. "No." He nodded, though his eyes said he didn't quite believe her. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Aria's gaze drifted to the distant mountains. "My dad." "Was he military?" Thorne pressed gently. A long pause. "Marine. Recon sniper," she said, the words carrying a history of their own. "Afghanistan. He taught me everything." Thorne went silent. He understood. He knew the legacy of those men. He simply watched as she returned to her mat, settled in, and fired another perfect group. "Bullseye." "He taught you well," Thorne said, a faint smile touching his lips. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He stayed until she had finished her ritual, cleaning the rifle with meticulous care before wrapping it back in its canvas shroud. As she walked past him to leave, he held out a small, plain white card. "Come shoot here sometime," he said. Aria took it. There was no name, no number. Just a set of GPS coordinates printed in a faint gray font. Virginia. She glanced from the card to the man, who was already walking back to his Suburban, his phone to his ear. Something deep in her gut told her this wasn't just an invitation. It was a summons. That night, she sat in her small, rented trailer, staring at the card. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, a whisper from a lifetime ago, "One day, someone's going to see you, Aria, and realize what I've always known. You're not meant for ordinary things." The GPS coordinates led Aria to a place that didn't officially exist. Buried deep in the rolling hills of Virginia, hidden by dense forest, the facility was invisible to the outside world. A single, unmarked gravel road ended at a checkpoint manned by 2 men in tactical gear who didn't speak. They checked her ID against a list, scanned the chassis of her truck, and waved her through without a word. The compound was a world of gray concrete and steel. Clinical. Impersonal. Training grounds were surrounded by towering fences topped with razor wire. There were no flags, no unit insignias, just sharp eyes and sharper movements. Aria was assigned a Spartan room, a bed, a desk, and a note that read, "Assessment begins at 0500. Be sharp, or don't be at all." She didn't sleep. Her mind drifted to a memory of a blizzard in Montana, her hands numb with cold. Her father was beside her, his voice calm against the howling wind. "Don't fight the wind, Aria. Listen to it. Dance with it." Morning came fast and cold. On the range, 12 other candidates were already lined up. 11 men and 1 other woman, all of them radiating an aura of supreme confidence. They were giants, sculpted from muscle and experience. Patches from their former units, Green Berets, Force Recon, PJs, were stitched onto their gear. They all looked at Aria and her old Winchester the same way, with a mixture of pity and disdain. One of them, a hulking former Marine recon sniper named Mackie, smirked openly. "Did you pull that out of a museum, sweetheart?" he drawled. "I'll bet you $50 you don't make it past the first round." Aria didn't reply. She just stepped to her station, laid down Dad's promise, and locked in. The instructor, a man with a face like a clenched fist, barked the rules. A series of targets from 400 to 1,500 yards. The wind would be artificially shifted every 60 seconds. Live competition. Fastest and most accurate shooter sets the tone. The others fiddled with their $10,000 rifle setups, consulting digital wind meters and ballistic computers. Aria closed her eyes for a second, feeling the air on her cheek. The first shot was at 400 yards. Aria was second fastest, her bullet landing dead center. The second, at 600, she was the fastest and most accurate. By the sixth shot, out at 1,200 yards, a sudden, violent crosswind was generated. The other shooters cursed, frantically adjusting their scopes. Aria paused for a half second, adjusted her aim by an almost invisible margin, and squeezed the trigger. Bullseye. A murmur rippled down the line. Mackie's smirk had vanished. The instructors exchanged stunned glances. Thorne stood behind the line, arms crossed, his face a mask of stone. He just watched. The final test was the tiebreaker, a single shot at 1,530 yards. The target was partially obscured by a simulated barricade, and the wind was swirling unpredictably. They had 6 seconds to identify, range, and fire. The buzzer sounded. The other shooters scrambled, dropping prone, shouting data. Aria was already on the ground. She measured the terrain with her eyes, counted the rhythm of the dust devils dancing near the target. 5 seconds, 4, 3. She exhaled slowly, her finger tightening on the trigger. Dance with it. Crack. Silence. Then, a full second later, the faint, satisfying ping of lead hitting steel. Center mass. The lead instructor grabbed the digital spotting scope, checking the feed twice. "Who the hell is this woman?" someone whispered in disbelief. Mackie just stared at his own rifle, then at Aria, as if he'd just seen a ghost. For the next week, the facility became a forge, and the candidates were the steel being hammered into shape. The drills were relentless, designed to shatter habits and expose weaknesses. Sleep was a luxury, stress a constant companion. But while others struggled, Aria thrived. She absorbed every lesson, her performance growing sharper, more precise with each passing day. The whispers of doubt from the other candidates turned into murmurs of awe, then into silent, grudging respect. The final assessment was a full immersion, live-fire simulation. A hostage scenario in a sprawling, multi-level mock village. The conditions were brutal, a freezing, driving rain that turned the ground to mud and visibility to near zero. 12 operators, 4 teams of 3. Their objective, infiltrate, neutralize threats, rescue the hostage, and extract. No do-overs. Aria was paired with Mackie and a quiet former Air Force JTAC named Trip. Watching from a darkened command center, behind a wall of monitors, was Commander Thorne and the program's senior evaluators. The simulation began. Trip guided them with drone feeds while Mackie provided overwatch. Aria moved alone, a phantom in the rain-soaked shadows. She flowed through the environment, her movements silent and calculated. Suddenly, she froze. A faint reflection in a second-story window, nearly invisible against the glare of a security light. A sniper. The shot was, by any tactical manual, impossible. Obstructed view, severe backlighting, and the swirling rain made a clean shot a 1 in a million gamble. Mackie's voice crackled in her ear, "No shot, blue fire." "I don't have a clear." Aria didn't hesitate. She dropped to one knee in the mud, the cold water soaking through her pants. She didn't use a rangefinder. She read the angle, the distortion of the light through the rain-streaked glass, the way the wind whipped a loose piece of tarp on a nearby roof. She adjusted for elevation and glare, her mind a supercomputer of instinct and experience. She fired. The window shattered. A siren blared in the command center. Kill confirmed. The rest of the mission was a blur of brutal efficiency. They retrieved the hostage and extracted with time to spare. Final score, 11 minutes, 34 seconds. 0 civilian casualties. 0 friendly fire. A perfect run. That evening, the candidates stood in formation in a frigid, cavernous hangar. The rain hammered against the metal roof. The senior evaluator read out the scores. Some passed. Some failed. Aria stood in the back, helmet tucked under her arm, her face unreadable. Then, Commander Thorne stepped forward into the center of the hangar. For a long moment, he said nothing, his gaze sweeping over the exhausted operators. The air grew thick with tension. He began to walk, his boots echoing on the cold concrete. He didn't walk to the podium. He walked directly toward Aria. She straightened instinctively as he stopped a few feet in front of her. The rain and sleet from outside swirled in through the open hangar door, catching in the dim light. Thorne's face was grim, unsmiling. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion that seemed to silence the storm itself, he raised his hand to his brow in a full, flawless military salute. The entire hangar went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop over the sound of the rain. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't ceremony. A commander of Thorne's stature did not salute a civilian candidate. It was a gesture that broke every rule, a sign of the deepest, most profound respect, the kind given not to a subordinate, but to an equal. A legend. Aria's breath caught in her throat. For a heartbeat, she was frozen. Then, her training, her father's voice, took over. She raised her hand and returned the salute, her motion crisp, sharp, and perfect. In that silent, sacred moment, something shifted. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was one of them. The salute was not an ending, it was an initiation. Aria was given a new designation, codename, Blue Fire, and a new mission. She wasn't being deployed. She was being made an instructor. Her purpose wasn't to be the weapon, but to forge them. Her students were not the arrogant, top-tier operators she had trained alongside. They were a unit the system had discarded, unofficially nicknamed the Lost. They were veterans, brilliant specialists who had been wounded, physically or mentally, and deemed unfit for active duty. A former Delta operator with a prosthetic leg. A CIA field agent with severe PTSD. A young Marine sniper, Keller, who had lost his left arm in Syria. They all carried the scars of war, but in their eyes, the fire hadn't gone out. Thorne's logic was simple: who better to teach precision under pressure than a woman who was the living embodiment of it? Aria's methods were unorthodox. She didn't bark orders or quote field manuals. She watched, she listened, and she adapted. During a long-range session, Keller was struggling, the recoil from his rifle throwing off his balance with every shot. The other instructors had written him off. Aria didn't. She stayed with him for hours after everyone else had left, working under the cold glow of the range lights. She didn't just give him instructions, she worked with him. She modified his rifle grip, designed a custom elbow rest, and taught him a breathing technique her father had once shown her, timing his shot not with his breath, but with the single, steady beat of his heart between pulses. For 3 days, he failed. On the 4th day, something clicked. He squeezed the trigger, and the distant target rang out with a clear, perfect hit. Keller lowered the rifle and began to cry, not from the pain in his shoulder, but from the overwhelming relief of someone believing he still could. Word spread. The Lost began lining up for her sessions, not because they were ordered to, but because she saw them not as broken soldiers, but as unfinished warriors. She was giving them back the one thing the system had taken away, their purpose. One night, Vega, a grizzled ex-Delta instructor, found her in the armory, meticulously cleaning a set of suppressors. "You know what Thorn told me when he brought you in?" Vega asked, his voice a low rumble. Aria looked up. "He said you weren't meant to fight our wars," Vega continued. "You were meant to keep our people from dying in them." Aria didn't reply. She just gave a slow, deliberate nod. He was right. By the end of her second month, Keller was out shooting able-bodied snipers, and the facility had its first perfect simulation run, executed by a team from the Lost. Aria Vance, the ghost of Lane 7, had become Bluefire, the forger of ghosts. Bluefire's legend grew in the shadows. She never wore a uniform, never held an official rank, but her influence became the bedrock of a new, deniable unit, Project Echo. Her graduates, the warriors pulled back from the brink, were sent to places the news never reported, stopping threats before they started. After a major joint unit exercise, where a team trained by Bluefire outperformed a squad of active-duty SEALs, Thorn found her on the observation deck. In front of visiting generals and intelligence officials, he once again stopped before her and rendered a slow, perfect salute. This time, no one was surprised. It was simply an acknowledgement of fact. Far away, the Arizona sun beat down on the old shooting range. Roy, the owner, still kept Lane 7 empty. One afternoon, a teenage girl arrived, holding a hunting rifle that was too big for her. She told Roy she'd heard stories about a woman who trained there, a woman who could change lives with a single shot. Roy just smiled and pointed her toward Lane 7. Tacked to the target post was a small, weathered brass plaque he'd put there himself. It read, "Lane 7 reserved for the ghost." Resting on the plaque was a single, unique shell casing, a .30-06 from a Winchester. On its base, a tiny, hand-carved V was etched into the brass. The girl picked it up, her eyes wide with wonder. The legend was being passed on. Thousands of miles away, on a snow-dusted slope in Norway, Aria Carter was watching wind patterns through a spotter scope. She was mobile now, a whisper on the wind, refining training for NATO's most elite units. She received an encrypted message from Mackie, Keller's team lead now. "Pulled a hostage out of a hot zone. He said to tell you, he danced with the wind." A small, quiet smile touched her lips. That night, she sat alone by a fire, staring up at the endless, star-filled sky. For a moment, she could almost hear her father's voice in the wind. "Not bad, kid. Not bad at all." She took a deep breath, a breath she felt like she'd been holding for years. It wasn't relief. It wasn't rest. It was peace. She didn't need the world to know her name. Her legacy wasn't written in headlines, it was written in the steady hands of the warriors she'd forged, in the silence before a bullet flew true, and in every soldier who made it home. This story is a testament to the fact that true strength isn't always loud. It's often found in the quiet, focused dedication to a craft. What did Aria's story mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in the power of quiet professionals, give this video a like and share it with someone who inspires you. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the unsung heroes who walk among us. Please, always comment with respect for the service members and veterans in our community.